Let's talk on track, off track right now, where we talk about some things that are going well and maybe not so well in the world of motorsport. So what do you got for on track this week?
We've had a lot of change in the NASCAR industry last 5 years, last 2 years, last 10 years, however far you want to go back. But one of the constants that's been in this industry is Martinsville Speedway. Broke ground 1947. We've been racing there since 1948. The track has kept up with changes. Used to have 2 pit roads, used to be all asphalt, all things that they changed over the number of years. They've run modifieds, they've run late models, they've run Busch Cars, Xfinity Cars series, they've run the Sprint Cup, Winston Cup series. Since 1948, that track has been entertaining fans. The race shape of the track, which some tracks have changed. Atlanta Motor Speedway is one of them. There's rumors about Phoenix Speedway changing the configuration of the track. Martinsville Speedway has never changed. It's been paperclip shaped. The only thing they've done is they've modified the corners with concrete several years back to give because the cars were tearing up the asphalt. But Martinsville Speedway has been an amazing facility, putting on great action. We saw another 2 races this week since 1948. No other track can say that.
Speaking of a little bit of Virginia heritage, by the way, the Wood Brothers made their return to Martinsville this past weekend, and some of our guys, Steve Post, Robbie Mays, one of our producers here on the program, doing all the graphics that you see on the screen, went up to Stewart, Virginia, to the museum there with the Wood Brothers and talked with them. That video is at MRN.com right now. You'll want to check that out. It's really cool to hear some of the history and heritage there. All right, my on track, speaking of some things going right, all the new faces we saw up front. I say new, they're guys that have been around for a while, but typically you see the guys you mentioned at one point, there were like 5 or 6 guys and 10 championships running up front. In this race, A.J. Allmendinger, Kyle Larson, Austin Dillon, Brian Vickers, Paul Menard, all running up front in the points. We got A.J. Allmendinger up there, Ryan Blaney. We've got Chase Elliott up there, Ricky Stenhouse having a better season. All these new faces up front, I think, is attributable, at least in part, to what we've seen with this new downforce package. It's kind of leveled the playing field, giving guys a reset button, and some of them are taking advantage of it right now, and I think we're far from determining who the favorites are going to be this season for a championship.
No, there are teams, Roush Fenway and RCR, who have lacked performance in the last couple of years that have definitely turned up the wick a little bit on the other teams. They have found some speed. Paul Menard started that race in the top 10, drove up past the leader, and was able to lead laps at Martinsville for one of the very few times. Those guys had a strong performance and able to bring Dillon back into the top 5 for a strong finish. Slugger Labby, his crew chief. So those guys have found speed. RCR is also an affiliate of the 47. So we've seen the strength of those teams. Absolutely. The new faces are definitely a refreshing seeing. We don't have to see the Kyle Bushes ruining the series.
Oh, here he goes. Yeah, we did see a bunch of that.
It's good to see these new fresh faces, like you said, because it's just opening up more opportunities. The more we bring new people in, new teams or teams that have been around but better performing teams into the mix, it just helps the whole industry.
I mean, not that the Globetrotters aren't fantastic, but do you really want to see them thrash the Washington Generals every time? No, you don't. That's the answer.
That would never work, would it?
No, it never would.
They wouldn't last very long if they did that.
You think? They've only been around for decades. Okay, let's talk a little off track now. Some things that maybe we think aren't going quite so well. What do you got?
Martinsville Speedway, 1947. They broke ground. Wait.
That was on.
The truck race at Martinsville Speedway. Gentlemen, who allows you to drive like idiots? For some reason, whenever we go truck racing at Martinsville, you guys lose and unscrew your heads, and somehow or another, somebody tells you it's okay. Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch were able to drive that truck race with the same level of respect that we saw in the Sprint Cup race on Sunday. Learn from that. Go back and watch, because the truck race at Martinsville has now become a slugfest that's nasty. It's hitting below the belt nasty. It's not a matter of a good fight, side-by-side door racing. It's, I don't care about you. I don't care about your truck. And you know what? I don't care about my truck either, so I'm just going to beat the living crap out of it.
You can't put this all on the truck guys. Let's remember what happened before this race. The last time we were at Martinsville, you had the whole Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano deal.
But that's a rare instance. We have good racing at Martinsville in the Cup Series. It's not sloppy. That was a sloppy incident in the Cup Series last year, but that's a rarity. Very rare do we see the amount of sloppiness in one race, in one series, that we do with the truck race at Martinsville. Every Martinsville, we run twice a year. I walk up everybody on the spotter stand goes, "Yeah, this race is gonna just," and it runs good for 150, maybe 175.
Right, I was going to say,
laps.
right at the end, it got nuts.
Exactly right, because everybody just gets that wick turned up. They unscrew their helmets and they put them back in the back, and their
Time
heads
to
are
go.
going. Right, and they're going to drive through everybody. There's a way to run this race and be successful. If you go back and you watch Kyle Larson's, and not everybody was bad, but there's a group of younger drivers there that when they show up to Martinsville, they completely throw every way of driving normal out. And it's a very sloppy race, and that's the part I don't like.
Speaking of that, after that truck race, Kyle Busch did win. John Hunter Nemechek was involved with some different guys and some of that thumping and bumping along the way. He is the point leader now in the Camping World Truck Series, and here's what he had to say after the race.
Yeah, it was kind of an up and down day. We started 8th and had to work our way to the front, just be patient. Right there at the end, we got caught with a little bit of strategy. We had a lot older tires and all those guys behind us trying to hold them off. So luckily we salvaged a second place. It sucks. I wanted the clock this year, but we still had the fall race to do that.
There you go, John Hunter Nemechek talking about how important tires were at Martinsville. We heard A.J. Allmendinger talking about burning the left rear tire off. We heard Chris Osborne earlier talking about how important tires were. You don't think of Martinsville as being all that abrasive like you would, say, the old Darlington or in Atlanta even, or what Auto Club Speedway has turned into now.
It's amazing how fast we take a 3,400-pound race car and go from essentially 60, 70, 80 miles an hour up to over 120 miles an hour down the straightaway. And the only way you can do that is to put an 800 horsepower through the rack tires and being able to launch that car. But how about John Hunter Nemechek, our point leader?
Yeah.
No sponsor. Sponsor this kid. He's
Yeah.
winning races. He's leading the points. Get your name on the side. My name here. It's good.
The trucks don't come back until Kansas in early May, but right now that kid is really getting it done, and it's amazing to see that truck show up jet black week after week after week.
Yep, you have an off track. I want to hear it.
I do have an off track.
Yep.
It's about how perception can sometimes become reality. We saw a whole bunch of tweets and social media commentary yesterday about how the race wasn't all that great at Martinsville. I mean, you had a really good finish, a guy who doesn't often finish up front, and A.J. Allmendinger right there, all the new faces that we mentioned, guys finishing up front that we haven't normally seen consistently in the top 10. We've seen 2 photo finishes so far this season with races in the first 6 events, 2 photo finishes we've had, and the perception is, the racing wasn't all that great. I think the racing is substantially better. I think it's backed up by the evidence in terms of what we've seen. You might think that if a guy dominates and leads a bunch of laps that it's not all that compelling, but what we're seeing that we haven't seen in the past is passing and real contentious battles back in the field for guys trying to get their way up to the front. You and I were talking this past weekend about an article that Tom Jensen over at Fox Sports wrote where he talked with Richard Petty. You know, he's won a couple of races along the way and knows a thing or two about racing. He won 15 times at Martinsville, right? Back in 1970, when everybody thinks that everybody finished 40 wide, upside down, and on fire at the stripe every single week, which is, I don't know if you know this, is not true, by the way. Back in that race, Richard Petty won by leading 480 of the 500 laps. You know how many cars finished that race?
Yep.
10.
10
cars finished that race. If that happened today and somebody led 480 of the 500 laps and 10 cars finished, people would lose their minds. Twitter would melt.
And they shut the racetrack down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only one I can read better is 1951 at the same facility. 4 cars finished the race.
Yeah.
In 1951. And that's the difference in what Tom Jensen was talking about. Our perception of how great racing was back in the day. You know, Earnhardt and Cale Yarborough never had to put up with that. Yeah, bull. It's a bunch of junk. And we all had certain races that were good. We saw basketball games this weekend with
so it won by 44 points. Are you kidding me?
And that's a Final Four game. You know what I mean?
Where everybody's supposed to be really, really good.
Exactly. And just one of those games that it did happen. So I completely agree with you. We need to be more realistic about our expectations when we start comparing against the past of what we watched.
Right. We have a tendency to romanticize what happened in the past. And I think right now, you heard A.J. Allmendinger talking about it. With this low downforce package combined with these softer tires, we've really got something that's moving in the right direction. And I think the teams are going to start getting that back. As Paul Wolf told us a couple of weeks ago, they'll find a way to get some of that downforce back, and I expect we'll see more of it come off.